In this video, we're going to go over 5 good reasons that often aren't considered to not retire yet. My name is Daniel McCluskey, founder of McCluskey Financial, and a few of these reasons are from a conversation I had with a client the other day, and the third and fourth are others from after. So we'll start with some more practical risks, and then we'll move into some more financial risks at the end. Let's get into it. First is there's no plan for what you're going to do in retirement, but rather you just want out of what you're currently doing. Maybe you have worked at a job for 20, 30 years. Maybe stresses are rising. You're angry with coworkers, with how you're being treated, with your employer, and you just want to get out of that. But instead, we want to run towards our future retirement, the goals that we are going to set, the lifestyle that we're going to live, the person that we are going to strive to be, instead of running from the madness that's behind us. Because a lot of times what people will find is right when they get out of that, they finally get away from the dinosaur that was chasing them. Now they don't know what to do. They have all this time and it's confusing. It's weird, it's different. And that's a situation we don't want to have happen to us. Now I want to show a chart here, and this isn't meant to scare you, but according to this source here, approximately 28% of retirees are depressed. And while I think a lot of that can be attributed to no plan, no goal, not understanding why we're here, the big questions in life, it also can be attributed to this here. This is a chart from the World Economic Forum, and you can see this shows people's time spent alone with partner, family, children, friends, coworkers as you age. And as people get closer and closer to retirement, you can see what rises the fastest, and that's time spent alone. And with that comes all of those questions of, why am I here? Where am I going? What does anyone care about me? Are people going to forget about me? What am I going to do with all this time? And those are questions that for a lot of people, unfortunately, whether it's due to putting it off or just not thinking about it, these questions that haven't been confronted their entire lives are almost forced upon them, for better or for worse, and they have to come up with an answer. And the more that people continue to delay these questions, the more stressed, the more likely they are to be depressed, rather than if they face those head on, they have a plan, they know what they're going to work on. And think of it like when you have a career and you are going to change jobs, usually, or you're trying to farther in your career. You're going to make a game plan. You're going to make sure you're up at a certain time. You're going to walk out the door at a certain time. You're going to make sure you hit these deliverables each week. Or if you have a business, you're going to make sure you get these sorts of things done to make sure the business moves forward. But when people retire, a lot of time, unfortunately, they'll just think of it as they're done with all of that. They don't want to do that anymore. But instead, what I would challenge you to do is think of this like a new career. What are the things that you're going to work on? What are your goals? What are the deliverables that you're going to hit every single week? And you don't have to call it a deliverable if you want to get out of work lingo. However, we do need to be very intentional about our retirement and very intentional about the way we're going to live. And a quick tip to go along with this. If you're not sure, if you have an idea but you're not sure how it's going to work out, how it might change, how might your social life change, you can do what's becoming much more prominent nowadays, and that is what's called a phased or a partial retirement. So you can take it slower. Instead of going from 100 to 0, you can slowly climb down the ladder and get to the bottom. And when you're there, be ready to go full on. So a phased retirement, what is that? It says is a gradual transition, that's from Google, from full-time work into retirement, allowing individuals to ease into retirement by reducing their workload and working hours while still receiving some income and potentially benefits. It offers flexibility and a smoother transition than a complete and sudden retirement. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, my employer would never allow me to just cut my hours in half or take more time off. That's just not practical with my job. And I want to give 2 examples here. One was actually from a video I was watching earlier this week from another guy that does finance on YouTube. Name is James. And he was talking about how he had a client who loved to shop at Trader Joe's. It was her favorite thing to do. and she just loved it there. Loved being there, loved the environment, loved buying things. And she found out that instead of being able to cut hours at her own job, because this really wasn't an option for her, she was able to pick up a job at this store that she loved being at, and the hours not only were flexible for her to maybe it's working so many hours a week or however many days a week or specific days a week, but also to where she could maybe work for 3 months and then take a month off and go travel. And this was perfect for her. So she could start to retire, start to enjoy those benefits, still keep a social circle, get a feel for what things are like, and make adjustments as she goes. So that's one way you could do it. Another example is I actually know of a family where the husband loves movies. And while he retired from his main job, he actually found a gig to be able to work in the background of movies. So he's a background character, and it's hilarious. Now they are sitting in the living room watching movies as they usually do, and the kids say, hey, there's Grandpa or Pops on TV, and he's right there. And it's just because he's in the background of these movies. He gets a paycheck. He's able to use that to spend on extra vacations, extra travel, and it supplements his lifestyle. Maybe for you, it's just supplementing your expenses. However, this is a fantastic option to be able to smoothly transition from 100% fully working to 0% fully working, at least in the career aspect of working. We're still going to be working just towards different things, ourself, our goals, our future. The second option, and this plays right in with that, so we'll go through it quickly, is going to be your social circle is all work-related and there's no plan for fun activities or socializing outside of work, especially if you're a talker, if this is a big part of your life, spending time with coworkers, going to events with your company, maybe it's spending time with employees if you're a business owner. This is something we want to make sure we also plan for head on. So that phased retirement could be a great way to start to, while you're working, part of the time, you can also start to experiment with different hobbies, activities, volunteering with a church, working at a golf course, whatever it is, you're going to start experimenting to making sure that even though you are inevitably going to cut back on your time with people and increase on your time alone, you can start to slowly transition into that and see where you might find things that are a better fit and maybe not so much. Third is going to be you love what you do or you feel like you ought to keep doing what you're doing. An example here of that second or the latter reason that I gave there is here is an American economist. He's 94 years old. The full interview comes out today, April 15th, at the time of this filming. You can see he's in a suit and tie. He's got all these books behind him that he's read. And I don't know if he loves what he does, if he feels he ought to continue doing what he does, but either way, someone who's maybe spent all of this time gathering this knowledge feels like he can farther the economic future of the United States and feels like because of that, he's going to continue working, he's going to continue appearing on shows, talking about what's going on. This is him at age 94, looks healthy, talking about what's going on with Trump's tariffs. So it doesn't have to be a big thing like that where you're wanting to potentially advance the future of the economy of the US, but rather maybe it's that you're just volunteering and you felt that people have given to you so much in your life and it's your turn to give back. Maybe it's the Knights of Columbus, for example. And that's something that really means a lot to you. You feel like it's your time to do that. And if that's the case, that is a very strong reason to not retire. This is something that you feel God is calling you to do, then I absolutely would consider that. And maybe it's even just doing it part-time. But if you love what you do, keep doing it, because not working, maybe it won't be for you. Retirement's not for everyone, or at least a full retirement isn't for everyone. And feel like you ought to do what you are doing, because even if you get all that time back and you feel like you're wasting it, that could be troublesome emotionally. So if you're in that situation, consider that. Fourth is if you have no income buckets. And what I mean by that is a differentiator between your wants and your needs. So I want to show here is people usually have their current level of income to supplement the lifestyle that they're currently living. So let's say in this example that is $80,000 a year, and that's going to adjust for inflation over time. And then they have a dream level, let's just say a little above that, let's call it $150,000 $30,000 a year, and then they have their survival, or just their absolute needs level. And people generally, we'll call that 30,000. Let's say maybe they've paid off house and car, and then that's going to adjust for inflation over time. And people generally know what their current level is, and maybe they don't entirely know what their dream level is, but they know it's more than what it currently is. And the problem with this is that without having clarity on these numbers, we can delay our retirement or spend way less than we could just out of fear or straight ignorance of what we're spending and what changes we might have to make based on situations with the US and the world, with a war, with tariffs that are currently going on. If we go into a recession, JP Morgan, the biggest investment bank in America, currently warns of one, increased their odds of up to 45% last week. But there's always something going on, is my point. And when people don't have an idea of these different buckets, oftentimes they'll push off retirement. They won't spend enough money. And what they'll realize if they just sit down and do this is that the difference between their current level and their needs, now we're not trying to get all the way down here, is much larger than they think. And usually, most people will be able to realize if they sit down and do a budget and realize what their actual needs are, that they could blink and cut out $20,000 to $30,000 a year, pretty much no problem. They're just things that, yeah, they really like, but they'd be just fine cutting out. So if, for whatever reason, something happened with the market or they needed to pull out a lump sum to fund some sort of medical emergency or something like that, or help out a loved one, that they would be just fine reducing their means and still being able to live a great retirement. And because of the lack of clarity on these different buckets, too often will people just work too long or worry way too much. Fifth, and finally, is that I talked about this one the other day in a different video, but that is understanding possible Social Security changes. This book here, Social Security Simple and Smart, is by someone who worked for 32 years for the Social Security Administration in various different positions. And he talks about essentially that currently the trust fund that's paying out Social Security, especially if you're going to rely on this pretty heavily, is set to deplete in, depending on which projection you look at, around 2035. Trump is currently pushing for Social Security to be tax-free, which a lot of people would love. However, if that was the case, then the trust fund would deplete in 2033, again, depending on the projection you look at. And what this means, regardless of if it's tax-free or if it's not, is that changes are coming. Now, the full retirement age is currently 67. It used to be 65, and that could increase. I was just talking to someone who's 56 and was talking about, yeah, I probably will take my Social Security around age 65. We'll see how things pan out. However, one thing I wanted them to be aware of is that that retirement age might change to 70. And that's actually one of the ones he says in this book. I'll go over a couple other ones. For example, that first one is the retirement age to age 70. The reducing the cost of living adjustment. So Social Security increases each year with a little inflationary calculation. They could change how that's calculated to make it worse for people who are receiving Social Security. They could reduce benefits by 5% for all future retirees. They could reduce benefits to people making $100,000 plus a year. So the benefits would be less for them, or they can make it to where they only pay it out to people who are only making a certain amount of money. Social Security payroll tax could be cut by or raised by 0.5%. They could tax all earnings. So in 2025, currently it's 176.1 thousand is taxable for Social Security. They could raise that to all income. They could tax all Social Security benefits, even though Trump is wanting it to be tax-free currently. And they could require all state and local government workers to pay into Social Security. So instead of just paying into their pension or whatever. So all of these are changes that could happen. Do we know what's going to happen? Absolutely not. Do we know something's going to happen? Absolutely. So make sure if that is a big thing you are relying on in your retirement to just understand how things may change. Hopefully, this video was helpful. If it was, do be sure to subscribe. I release videos 3 times a week and do a live stream once a week as well, going into more detail, all things retirement, different strategies, etc. So subscribe, and I will see you in a future video.